The Bloodline is an early access sandbox adventure RPG that exists in a strange space between Skyrim and Runescape with an impressive level of freedom that honestly feels quite refreshing. You're free to be the crafter of your dreams without picking up a single weapon, or you can single-handedly go out and decimate the goblin population to become a renowned hero. No matter what path you choose though, just be ready to run into a fair number of bugs along the way, because when I say the Bloodline is in early access, we're talking early access. My name's Johnny Bueno, and in the Bloodline, I took the role of a special lad known as the Harbinger. The Harbinger is essentially a member of some long royal bloodline that has commanded respect over the ages. You'll essentially be working to get everyone in the land to notice you through your deeds so that nobody forgets the greatness of your bloodline. There's more details on the lore behind who you are exactly as you progress through the main questline, but let's just leave it at that for now. You'll be accomplishing your noble deeds in a sandbox-style world that, while advertised as an open world, isn't as open as you'd think. The game world is presented as several separate zones that are reachable through a world map screen. You select a destination on the world map, and your character will travel to your destination while time fast forwards, giving the players a sense of scale as it can take a day or several days of in-game time to reach another area. This system probably sounds quite familiar to those that have played the Mount & Blade games, and while it's not necessarily a bad system in the context of the Bloodline, it certainly isn't a true open-world experience. Now, as for the zones themselves, despite the game's early access status, there is a pretty decent variety of open areas, dungeons, and bustling cities to visit, even in its current state. You'll visit sprawling flatlands, lush forests, volcanic crags, and snowy fields filled with wildlife and plenty of nodes to gather resources from. Cities do feel bustling and alive, even if the NPCs inhabiting them just seem to wander aimlessly or stand completely still in random spots. Although some are still incomplete, what I did like about the cities in the Bloodline is that several of them seem to take inspiration from real-life historical locations. There's plenty of your typical fantasy town hubs, but you've also got a city inspired by ancient Greece, filled with hoplite-style soldiers, or a more classic Italian-style city with some rather impressive architecture. The latter is yet to be complete, as the NPC dialogue here seems to be placeholder for the time being, but it's clear that the developer has a keen eye for designing cities with some serious scale. These areas and their inhabitants are all presented in a mostly charming, low-poly graphical presentation. I think the game has just enough goofiness where this style actually complements it quite well. And because these zones are actually well designed with many points of interest to give each one some character, it doesn't become a complete eyesore after the first few hours of gameplay. On the topic of gameplay, I hope you like grinding skills, because that's what you'll be spending a large portion of your time doing when playing the Bloodline. There's a ton of skills to grind up and improve, and knowing that this game is still at the beginning stages of early access, there's likely much more to come. For now though, you'll have the option of leveling up crafting and gathering style skills like woodcutting, mining, alchemy, and cooking. On top of that, there is of course your combat skills for each weapon category, like spears and two-handed weapons, along with a number of different schools of magic. Even beyond that, there are movement-based skills you can improve, like running, jumping, climbing, and even wall running. So yeah, on top of a world to explore and quests to complete, you can spend countless hours grinding away and watching numbers go up, so you can unlock the ability to grind higher level things and watch numbers go up even more. One thing I did like is that some skills do come with a little mini-game that you have to play that rewards you for proper timing. Woodcutting and mining, for example, rewards you with bonus resources for clicking at just the right moment. Smithing will have you playing DDR to increase the quality of your crafted weapon, and taming has you run around and collect hearts to earn the love of your target creature within a set time limit. These are all fairly simplistic touches to leveling your skills, but it's kind of a nice way to keep players engaged with the game beyond just crafting and gathering with the press of a single button. Another area that the Bloodline excels at is the sense of exploration when visiting the various zones spread throughout the world map. Each of the open field style areas always has something in the distance that will catch your eye and make you want to work your way towards it in search of treasure or a fight. Makeshift camps, abandoned churches, spooky crypts, and imposing towers are just a few examples of the points of interest you can run into, and sometimes, in addition to treasure, you'll find resource nodes or, if you're lucky, a spell book that will teach you a new spell. My favorite part of playing more open sandbox-style games is going to an area with a specific intention, like completing a side quest, only to be pleasantly distracted because I caught a glimpse of an abandoned shack far off in the distance. To aid you in exploration, the Bloodline features impressive freedom of movement that lets you freely climb surfaces and use a grappling hook to scale cliffs and buildings. And you're given this grappling hook right off the bat during the tutorial of the game, so it's not something you have to unlock through discovery or completing quests. As long as you have the stamina to keep using it, it's actually pretty easy to abuse, and you'll be able to climb whatever you feel like climbing without restriction. This blows exploration wide open, which I love, and I think this is completely intentional by the developer. And speaking of blowing exploration wide open, you're also able to obtain a flying mount early on in the game if you know where to look. For example, remember when I said my curiosity took over because I caught a glimpse of an abandoned shack in the distance? Well, this shack just happened to have a broomstick in it that's perfectly rideable, repeatedly summonable, and ready to take to the sky. So you're even given the ability to zip around in the sky, making questing and searching for gathering nodes incredibly easy. If you're feeling cheesy, you can even shoot enemies from atop your broomstick with range weapons while they helplessly stand in place and accept their fate. Some might call it cheap, I call it aerial superiority. On the more peaceful side of gameplay, there are some building aspects that you can mess around with in and outside of your stronghold, which serves as your character's home base. You can construct new buildings that provide various services like a smithy, or plop down a number of decorations to spruce up your stronghold and customize the exterior to your liking. However, this appears to be one of the more incomplete aspects of the game in its current state. Many of the buildings you can create, while listed in the building menu, haven't been implemented into the game yet. There's also an incredibly interesting system, the theme system, that allegedly invites certain visitors to your stronghold based on the type of buildings and decorations you put down. I tried testing this by putting down a number of Necromancer-style decorations, but besides giving me a marginal amount of experience for the Necromancer theme, it didn't seem to affect much. So I can only assume this is another feature yet to be implemented, but I'm very intrigued to see what the final product looks like so I can build my very own Necromancer Haven. The last thing I want to touch on for gameplay is the high number of bugs present in the current early access version of the game. Yes, I know bugs technically don't count as gameplay, but they do impact the gameplay experience. The game is pretty rough around the edges in its current state, and you're likely to run into several issues within the first few hours. Some of course are hilarious, while others may certainly be the cause of some frustration. Most of the bugs I encountered that either got my character stuck or caused something to block my screen were easily fixed with a reload of the game, but that doesn't take away from the fact that playing the Bloodline is certainly a flawed experience. But keep in mind the game is in its very early stages and is being developed by a single person, with several hotfix patches already being dropped since launch. Now that we've talked about general gameplay, let's discuss how the Bloodline handles combat. Melee attacks are handled with a typical left click to strike, right click to block, in addition to a parry strike, which can be performed immediately after blocking an attack. Pretty standard stuff, but there's also a metric ton of combat skills you can learn, with many more yet to come. You're given a small hotbar at the bottom of the screen where you slot your skills, up to a total of 10, with 5 on each bar that you can swap between with the control key. Weapon classes like one-handed weapons, two-handed weapons, spears, and shields all have their own skills to unlock by spending skill points obtained through leveling up, and that's just the melee-focused stuff. Range weapons have their own skill trees as well, as do the many schools of magic that will grant you a whole host of spells to have at your disposal. Much like how the game gives you complete freedom with how you approach exploration, it also gives you complete freedom with how you customize your approach to combat. There are no restrictions with learning, say, necromancy spells, even if you've already invested several points into melee skills. My character had a mix of spear-related skills alongside cryomancy, geomancy, and druidism spells that I simply chose because I thought the spell descriptions sounded fun. There aren't really any restrictions beyond mana and stamina costs that force you into a certain playstyle, and I absolutely love that about the Bloodline, as I was able to play the game however the hell I wanted to play it. I will say though, I found out pretty quickly that there are spells and abilities that are far more powerful than others, like this tombstone spell I learned from a spellbook that just obliterated everything in its vicinity. So, despite a large quantity of spells to choose from, there's likely still some balancing that needs to be done to even out their usefulness, as I was able to trivialize most enemy encounters through spamming the overpowered ones. Not every spell is offensive though. There are some other neat spells like this ice shield that blocks projectiles, or this earth spell that creates a little block you can jump on to reach higher surfaces. They give you some added utility that's just kind of fun to mess around with. Oh, and for you druid fans, there's also the iconic ability to shapeshift into other creatures like this ferocious rabbit. Lastly, I want to quick touch on the enemies you'll be facing in the Bloodline, and there really isn't much variety in the current version of the game. I found myself facing goblins and undead pretty much everywhere I went, which admittedly got old after a while. There are some unique variations of these enemies, like these goblin shamans or these jetpack goblins, but these encounters were few and far between. No doubt there's still plenty of enemy types to be added in the future, but be prepared to play Goblin Slayer until that happens. Despite some of the issues that comes with its early access state, the Bloodline shows an immense amount of potential as a sandbox RPG with an unrestricted level of exploration, tons of skills to grind, and a large amount of freedom when it comes to approaching combat. It's absolutely a title worth keeping your eye on, especially with all the features that are yet to be added. It's got a genuinely impressive scope, and I know I'll be revisiting the Bloodline many times as future updates roll out. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like or sharing your thoughts on the Bloodline in the comments below. I appreciate every bit of interaction and support as I love making videos just like this one. So please consider subscribing to support the channel, and as always, thank you for watching.